Okay. Hi everyone. What an extraordinary start to our resilience webinar. Obviously we're needing to show great resilience ourselves. 1,000 apologies. We had a really good turnout. We're really excited about it. And despite our best efforts, apparently technology was not on our side. And I'm sure we're not the first that's happened to, and we won't be the last. Thanks so much for the questions that already came through. Joe has recorded all of them, and our intention is most certainly to get this information to you so that you can be recorded and that you can make sure that you actually get access to this. Let me just get rid of all of that. So as I'm going through this process, you went through that with Joe and you answered this question. And I guess what I want to say is, we chose this topic because of the fact that it's such a vitally important thing. I came back from my holidays feeling really quite energised, and I was thinking, what is it that we need to do to make sure that we are mentally fit for 2019? We tend to be really good at making sure that we're physically fit. We set great goals. My goals actually included 50 squats a day, which is so far going okay. Not sure if it'll make much difference, but still. And the whole purpose really of this webinar is to look at our minds and make sure that we're in the best place we can be to have a fantastic year. So we do kick off our year with great intentions, and we're focused on, what it is that we want to do, what we want to achieve. And we want to normally be looking at balance between our work and our family life and, looking after other people other than just ourselves. And what we really want to do is make sure that we're in a position to take advantage of that. What actually tends to happen is work gets in the way, and it's not just work, it's actually the pace and the complexity of the work that's coming our way that tends to really cause some stress and angst for people as we're going through the working environment. And if I was to reflect on my last 12 months, it's had its ups and downs. There's been times I've really had to battle quite hard to keep my glass half full. But, I feel fortunate that I naturally do have a tendency to do that. But I certainly know from the people I get to speak to when I'm in my coaching role and with the rest of the team from Change 2020, that the people that we get to work with and listen to and hear their stories, we essentially hear the most amazing things. And sometimes, to be honest, I'm absolutely astounded at what people have to go through on a daily basis and how they manage to basically survive in some instances. And to think about our workplace at the moment is nearly all of us have been through a tremendous amount of change. There's restructure after restructure, there's merger, there's acquisition, there's a focus on digital transformation, cultural transformation, high performance teams, etc. We've always got lots of things coming our way that we need to be abreast of. And to be honest, I think that the challenge is that we are in a position where we're saying, how do I remain relevant? What is it that I need to do to make sure that I'm in the best position I can be to still be contributing to my organisation, and most importantly, probably to myself. I need to look after me first. So how do I lead myself through these changes and remain resilient? And then through my demonstration and my actions, I can actually do it for others as well. The really good news is that history tells us that we are a resilient bunch and we can do amazing things. And so let's kick this off with the discussion. What actually is resilience? So resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. So the recovering word is an interesting one. What does recover actually look like? It's really the capacity to be able to get back up onto your feet and say, I'm ready to go and move forward again. Another way of looking at it, it's the ability to bounce back from adversity or when things go wrong. And so, as I mentioned, our human nature says that we can tend to do that, but we do it at a different pace, generally speaking. And it also depends on the degree of what we've really had to go through. There's some amazing stories out there about resilience, and I was reading in preparation for this webinar around the founder of Spanx. So most of the ladies out there will know what that is, or have at least heard of it, which is it's like shapewear for underneath your clothing. And what Sarah Blakely actually went through to get to being now noted as the first self-made female billionaire globally. And essentially, she failed the bar exam legally twice. One of her greatest calls to success is when she was appointed as a chipmunk by Disney. And all of this occurred before she was in a position where she could actually, explore what she wanted to do. She couldn't get funding for her idea, etc. And she failed many, many times. one of the ways that she builds, she says that she's built her resilience is that she was actually selling fax machines for 7 years. Sounds horrendous. And she says, I had more no's than I call to remember, and many more people ripped up their business cards in front of her than, again, she cares to remember. But she went through that. She was tenacious and she kept going because she believed in her idea. And there's lots and lots of stories that we've got that we can talk about that. But today, quite specifically, I want to talk about two things. One of them is, how do you build and embed resilience? So this is something that we need to be focusing on a daily basis. But the other thing, and equally important, is what do you do when you're up against it? What do you do when you're feeling all that stress and angst is actually coming with you, and you're not really quite sure how you're going to respond to it? As we go through the process today, I'm going to share a few stories with you, and ideally you would have been able to engage with me on that process. But this morning, I actually flew down from Brisbane to Melbourne, which might have been past the challenge with our technology issue. But despite that, the reason I'm flying down and I'm here today is because I'm going to be celebrating a beautiful lady's life, who we lost, a great friend of ours, last month. And it got me thinking about grief and what grief can actually do to people. And it's really quite tricky. Grief, it comes and sneaks up at you when you least expect it. And that's okay. It's just, how do we move through it? How do we make sure that it doesn't actually, fix us in a position that we can't move through? And, I was also looking at the Financial Review when I was flying down, and on the in the paper on page 1 is a reference to Queensland's resilience based on particularly the recent floods, and just the fact that, the thousands of rural properties, have been significantly impacted by the inland sea, they're calling it. There's some rural properties that have lost 80% of their cattle, and the whole newspaper article actually has people interviewed throughout. And it's interesting, the message is exactly the same. It's hard work, but we've got to keep going, and we've got to make sure that we're in a position where we can move forward. And they say we've got no choice, but to me that is actually the choice, because it is a choice to build resilience. So why must we build it? And quite simply, it's because change is inevitable and growth is optional. Change is one of the most commonly cited reasons for stress in a workplace. Stress costs Australia annually close to $15 billion. It's extraordinary to me that that's the amount of money. And there was a global survey ran by Korn Ferry towards the end of last year. A couple of thousand professionals were involved in that survey, and they cite as the number one reason for stress is the continual pace of uncertainty and change in their workplace, be it technology, restructures, but general overall changes to their workplaces. And people are not actually being able to, they're not keeping up with it to the degree that they ideally would want to. I did a search on Google, over 145 million searches come up on the topic of resilience. So people are searching for answers on this particular topic. It definitely has a direct impact on your ability to manage stress and respond positively to change. And so those who have a higher tolerance for change, and therefore often have a higher tendency to be resilient, are those who have less stress in their life. And quite simply, it's an imperative skill that we need to have as we move forward. So firstly, a few facts about resilience, and this is the good news. We're not born with it, but we can all absolutely develop it. And fundamentally, that's something that we can develop as we get. Each day is an opportunity to develop it further. And unfortunately, there's no magic pill. It's interesting, we talk about this topic a fair bit in our work, and some people say, well, just tell me how to do it. Like, is there a tool, a technique, is there something? And the answer is no, it's choice, it's mindset. But absolutely, I promise you, it's all up to you. You have that choice. It's about whether you choose to go down that path. And also, resilience is not dependent on extreme pain or hardship. It's actually just something that we need on a day-to-day basis. All of us have to pay attention to what we need to make sure that we're in a position where we can continue to bounce back or recover from, the difficulties that we face in our daily lives. And resilience is absolutely not an end state. You don't get to it and say, I'm resilient now, all good to go. Rather, it really does require continued effort. It requires intention and practice. And we really need to make sure that people are paying attention to that, because it's something that we build up. It's almost like we build a support mechanism around ourselves, which is the fundamental inclusion of that is resilience. It's a combination of experience, skill, competency, and mindset. And most importantly, you can choose to be a resilient person. And so in times when, you know, there's lots of change going on around you, standing still is actually the most dangerous choice we can make. And I was having a conversation with a team I was working with recently, and someone said, but you need to stop because you need to make sure you're looking at all the information around you. And I agree with that. You absolutely need to pause. But what you don't want to do is stand still. Whilst you're pausing, you can still actually be processing or progressing. Standing still means that people either step on you or run past you. So in actual fact, what we're saying is that the only choice you have is to build your levels of resilience. And by choosing to build resilience, and as you can see, you know, we've got the Superwoman cape there, what happens there is you can focus on your purpose. And the reason that's really important is that if you know what gets you out of bed each day, then you will focus on that and you'll try harder, and you'll want to be in that position where you're able to make a difference to people, and you can make a difference to why it is that you're here. If you don't actually have a clear direction of what it is you want to do or why you do what you do, the likelihood is that it's harder for you. You'll take a knock as something much more significant. But if you're very focused on your purpose, you can move forward towards that. Your well-being increases simply due to the fact that your stress is decreased. And that negative self-talk, we've all got that little voice in our head. Some of us have got multiple voices in our heads, and that's probably reasonable. What we need to do is learn to have our loudest voice, which is the positive voice that can challenge that negative voice that says, this always happens to me, or I can't do it because. That's actually not the case at all. You need to be able to challenge that negative self-talk as well. And you can create your success, and there's some stories around that. There's nothing truer than the fact that if you reflect on where you've actually already had successes and done well and remind yourself of that, you think, okay, I can move forward again because I know I've done it in the past. Sure, I'm feeling a bit injured at the moment, but I can still move forward because I've done this in the past. And finally, you get to feel, and I've got in brackets, more in control, because you're not going to ever achieve the ultimate control. But that more in control means that you had that opportunity to work out what it is that you want to focus on, and it feels like you've got that degree of control in that place. So how do we actually go about cultivating resilience? First and foremost, it's the choose part. So this is what I was speaking about, actively working towards a mindset where your glass is half full, where you are thinking about how can I be more positive or optimistic about that? And you can do that through training your brain. And I'm sure everyone's heard about neuroscience and neuroplasticity, and there is a process where if you want to do something different, you form your new habits. It's repetitive and it's consistent. So every time you hear your little voice being negative, choose to go positive, and you create that habit, you create that conversation. And two great techniques to do that is by practicing mindfulness, making sure that you are being aware of what's around you, being fully present in your particular place, and practicing gratitude as well. What are you grateful for on a daily basis? What do you want to say thank you for? The second one is to acknowledge that setbacks and disappointments and painful events, they happen to everyone. And they're singular events. It's not a momentous occasion that keeps on happening and happening. And I have to say, it does surprise me when I hear people say things like, oh, that's typical, it happens to me, and things like that. It's actually not the case. Like, everyone's had setbacks and disappointments. Walt Disney, for goodness sake, it took him over 300 attempts to get funding for his, for his theme park. And he was even sacked from a newspaper because he was told he wasn't creative enough. Colonel Sanders from KFC, over 1,000 attempts to get somebody to work with him on his recipe before KFC was hatched, good, bad or otherwise. And there's a whole lot of different examples that we've got in that place as well around that, about the fact that other people also get impacted by pain and by setbacks and disappointments, and somehow they move forward. J.K. Rowling's another great example. She was penniless, divorced, depressed, and she put pen to paper, and then along came that novel Harry Potter, and obviously the rest is history. I have actually got one great quote I want to speak to you about as well, which is Michael Jordan, who was actually cut, I'm sure you already know this, from his high school basketball team, but he has this quote which I need to read to you. I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I have lost almost 300 games. On 26 occasions, I've been trusted to take that game-winning shot, and I've missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. And I think that's extraordinary, that we need to focus on the fact that this happens to everyone. So be balanced. Remember what's working well for you as well. Define what's important to you and commit to those goals. A little bit like what I was mentioning before, if you are aware of your purpose and you can soldier on, what is it that's going to get you out of bed each day, that's going to make you feel, okay, I can take another step forward because I'm so committed to those goals? Defining that is really, it is fundamental. And I know through lots of the groups that we do work with, a lot of people have them really clearly in their mind. I really would encourage you to look down that pathway for yourself, because what you want to do is you want to make sure that if the bad comes along, you know that that's the way it's got to go, because you'll take another step forward the next day due to your clarity on your goals. The next one is to focus on what you can actually control and allocate effort and energy to what's in your area. Like, there is a tendency, I think, with, you know, just the influx of information for us to relatively easily catastrophize, you know, bring the stress levels up really quite quickly. But we don't need to do that. You know, the technique I've got there, that third bottom bullet point, is just to really write down what is in your control, and absolutely how you respond, how you react, your attitude, the language you use, all of that, that is actually in your control. And to get that focus, again, practicing that mindfulness, taking those deep nasal breaths to calm yourself down so you can work out, what is it that I know I can actually have a positive impact on right here, right now, particularly when it feels like everything around you is well beyond your control. Language is to stay in the present and use core facts and challenge the negative voice. So I mentioned before, when people say, oh, that always happens to me, it's just my luck. Get into the habit of challenging yourself, challenge others, and say, well, tell me when that last happened. Is it a fact, or is it it's a belief that's actually it's not serving you any longer? The belief needs to be adjusted, and you need to be in a position where you don't hold on to that, because that belief becomes a truth for you. And I love that comment, the last dot forward from Henry Ford. Like, if you think you can, or if you think you can't, you're right. It's so simple, but it's so true. So you're in charge of that. You're absolutely in charge of how you speak to yourself and how you speak to others. And then to get active, this is a really simple one, and I think that most people know that the more you move, the more we release our natural, happy and energetic endorphins. They're free. It makes us feel good. We need to go about doing that. And as little, honestly, as 30 minutes a day, that's, you know, a little bit more than obviously my 50 squats, but things like that, that actually get you moving and get you active. It has a direct correlation to our mindset, our attitude and our behaviour. It makes sense. It really will assist with a positive mindset. And to find your tribe. You know, who are the people that are going to look after you, going to support you? Who are the people who are going to help you get perspective? I think that's a really important part of this conversation, is that perspective. Sometimes you can feel like this always happens to me, or woe is me, or I never get ahead, etc., etc. But use your tribe for support. Ask them some questions. Find out what is going on with other people. Make sure you've got some diversity in your group of friends and your tribe, and definitely try and prioritise face-to-face engagement as well. It makes a huge difference. Laughter. It's a brilliant one. I mean, honestly, I had nothing other than to go down the path of delirious laughter this morning when I could see Joe, and I'm texting and ringing the rest of the team saying, I can't get through here at all. And so whilst our laughter was not necessarily contagious this morning with our technology issues, it does actually help you keep calm. And I have to say, despite the disappointment of not being able to get this up and running live, we've been able to move forward and solve the problem and come up with an alternative solution. And to journal on a daily basis. So it's important that when you're journaling to focus on what went well, what didn't go so well, but what can I do differently? So we tend to, the way we are, we look at what have I not achieved? What have I not managed to do today? You know, when you've got your list at the end of the day. But if you're actually also able to balance it out, what am I actually doing well? And it gives you some perspective about the things to be grateful for. Again, it helps with that practice of daily gratitude. So even if daily is too much for you, perhaps think about it on a weekly basis. What's fabulous is when you can reflect back and see what it is that you've actually done. It's really quite extraordinary. And so I guess that with cultivating resilience, that pain and devastation happens to everyone. I think about, you know, my beautiful auntie. She had 9 children and lost 3 of them before they were 4 years of age. I, as a parent, have absolutely no idea how you get up each day and move on from that. You know, I think about, as I say, you know, the family they'll be going with today and the grief that they're feeling. Another amazing story is like Stuart Diver, you know, who survived the avalanche in Thredbo many years ago and lost his wife. And only to a few years later, after he'd married the second time, to lose his second wife. And you think, how on earth do you actually keep going forward and feel that you can move? It's quite an extraordinary thing. You know, Turia Pitt is obviously one of the most extraordinarily resilient people on the planet. I would go as far as to say, you know, to have 65% of her body burnt and to continue just to move forward and, you know, to be a competitive ultra marathon runner is extraordinary. And I was reading a bit about her, and she's written a book called Unmasked, and it's also about, you know, who she is, but who she is as a mother. And she said her focus on mothering will be to prioritise resilience in her children over happiness. And I think that in itself is quite an extraordinary thing, because I think that, you know, happiness will come as a result of being resilient, but it's such an important part of everyone's life, and increasingly so. So the second thing I said I wanted to talk about was when you're actually up against it, when you're already in that part where you're feeling terrified or the stress is burning up. And what do we do about that? First and foremost, accept the reality of the situation. You are where you are, and you really do need to recognise that there's not a great deal that you can necessarily do to change all of that. So what you want to do is say, what are the facts of the situation, and what do I need to do about it from this perspective at this particular time? Create time to allow the space to think. So I've got drop the anchor there. And effectively, what I'm saying is that when you feel like everything's against you, like you're in a small boat and you're about to hit up against the rocks, if you drop the anchor, it's going to slow things down. It's got to actually secure the boat long enough for you to sort out why the boat's floating towards the rocks. And it's just a metaphor for you to think about, what do I need to do to create the time to allow space to actually think? You know, the fact that we've got so much going on all the time, I think it's actually seen as a luxury these days to do the thinking. But, you know, for example, if you're headed to a meeting that you're quite worried about or nervous about, or you're feeling stressed about, if it's possible, take the stairs rather than the lift. Use that time to very calmly do your deep breathing and think, so that you're in a position where you can respond rather than react. Physically slow yourself down and pay attention to your emotions. If you can feel yourself, and the thing about stress is a very physical thing. You'll hear sometimes you can even hear your heartbeat, you know, your pulse quickens, and sometimes you're even getting some sort of sweat going on as well. That's basically the fact that you are in a position that you're being controlled by your emotional brain. And what we want to do is slow you down. Even if you can sit down, collect your thoughts before you are able to move forward, because you need to activate that slow brain. Slow brain is at the front of your head, and it's all about your the prefrontal cortex. So you want to pay attention to. You need to stop the noise in your head, and it's not easy to do, but you can again do that. I can't explain enough like the value of that deep breathing and that mindfulness that just calms you right down. Slow the pace of your speaking, and be in a position where you can feel your fast brain settling down. And what happens is it starts to create some options. And again, right here today, I was texting saying, and I could feel myself getting really quite worried and stressed as it's 3 minutes to go, 2 minutes to go. And then when Joe started, I'm like, I can't hear you. And so very quickly, I was actually practicing, you know, exactly what I'm talking to you about now. I was trying to slow myself down, work out what's the solution. And so we're pre-recording and we'll send it to all of you. It's not the best, but it is certainly a solution to move forward. This is a great one. Invert the logic. You know, way too often when I even start coaching, I'll say to someone, so tell me how your week's been, and they'll tell me what they haven't done, what they have not been able to achieve, or what the problems are. And I'll ask people, hold on, can we also have a look at what's going right now? What is it that we need to say we need to do more of that? I know in the past I've done that and I've achieved that, so I can do a bit more. Having that balance, and you as whether you're in a leadership position or not, everyone's got the capacity to lead and influence. And so what I encourage you to do is when you hear people go down that spiral, and it is a spiral, to say, just put the brakes on, stop. What did you do well this week? Let's just hear one thing that you did well. Explore that a little bit more. Honestly, it switches people and they're in a position of going, okay, I'm going to look at something a little bit more positive. The other thing is to use the time to consider what's actually happening, and it's to collect the facts about the situation. It's not the gossip, it's not the noise, it's not the what ifs or the innuendo, any of that. Become almost belligerent about, I just need to know the facts of the situation. because it takes away all the clutter. We've got enough going on. There's other people around you who might be feeling panicked or nervous or worried. You need to not have that cloud, your judgment, because when you're using that time to consider, your emotions are still trying to jump in there. We don't want you to be bumping into all those emotional triggers and that amygdala that's trying to get back to you while you're trying to collect the facts. And ask others for ideas and help. Absolutely. We're in a position where you can ask people for ideas so that you're not alone in this situation. And to be perfectly honest, that's a sign of strength, not weakness. It's courageous to say, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I don't know how to go from this path forward. I've not been down this way before, or I've made a major mistake and I'm really worried about telling someone about it. Go to your tribe, see what they've got. I would suggest that 9 out of 10 times they've been in a similar position, or they can empathize enough to help you through that process. And finally, act. Don't get stuck. It's like what we spoke about earlier. Make sure you're moving forward and that you're going to do something different from that perspective. Action over inaction will win every single time, even if it's a very small step. So even if it is only about, this is what we're going to do tomorrow. This is what I need you to focus on in terms of what your role is. This is what we need to do in terms of communicating to this particular audience. Whatever it might be, act. Holding it back just causes more stress, concern, and worry. And when you're in that position, that's when those emotions are taking over completely and you're unable to get clarity and move to the place you want to get to. So what I want to do is ask you this really simple question, and I've seen it used in the past. It's to get into the habit of asking yourself this: is what I'm doing, thinking and feeling right now helping me or anyone else in any other way? So again, in my honesty, what am I doing? I'm trying to sort out what was wrong with the webinar, but technically that is not my skill set at all. I'm thinking of disappointing everyone that we had online, which, we were really looking forward to the engagement, and how I'm feeling, and I'm feeling stressed about it. But it wasn't helping. Not one of those areas was helping. So members of our team, Joe and Kelly, were absolutely a lot better to solve the problem than me. And so it's really quite simple to get into the habit of saying, if it's not, then stop doing it, thinking it or feeling it. Because it's not serving you. It's not serving others. What you need to do is challenge it and take charge of the situation the best way you can. That might be through breathing. It might be through sitting still. It might be through collecting your facts. But regardless, you need to challenge it. You need to take charge of what you can so that you're able to progress and step forward. So I encourage you, what will you do today to build and embed resilience into your life? What's the one thing that you can do to start today? And I want to leave you with one of my favorite quotes from, just one of the most amazing humans ever. Do not judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again. Nelson Mandela, an absolutely extraordinary person. And, again, resilience beyond resilience, that particular person. So I do want to thank you for listening to this as a recording. I want to thank you for registering. We will be running another seminar, which all will work, as I've been assured, in a month's time, and you'll be invited to that. We absolutely want to encourage your involvement, and obviously that's difficult to do from this perspective. But one of the things we wanted to wrap up with is say that, stories add to the richness of everyone's lives. If you've got something that you want to talk about in terms of your focus on resilience, or some areas that are challenging for you, or some great successes, we would love to hear about it. And you can contact us via the email where you've registered and let us know from your perspective what resilience means to you, what great stories that you want to share, because I love the opportunity to be able to share more stories with people about this. If I can influence one person and help them to feel a bit more resilient, then my job is done. So again, thank you very much for your effort, and I look forward to speaking with you next time. Thanks.